Hi, this is Matt from Illyrian Solutions. So I wanted to talk to you about why your project is failing and it isn't the team. And the reason that I say that and frame it that way is because in my experience, I've been doing, projects involved in projects for about 17 years now, is that I can't really think of a situation where I can look back and say, well, collectively the team just let things down. Sure, if there have been issues where you have to make an adjustment within the team, of course, but I can't really think of a situation where collectively the team just didn't execute at all. So, wanted to talk a bit about some of the things that I have seen, and these are real world things. These are not theoretical or textbook things. These are things that I see, have seen multiple times in projects over that time frame. So the first one is invisible goalposts, and the way kind of I frame this one is that we want to make sure that the goal of the project is clear and there's nothing blocking the team from being able to see the goal. So, kind of some of the contributors. So we'll start with the very first one, which is just, the basic one. And this sounds like so basic, you might think, oh, why are you even bringing this up? But the reason for that is that um, I can't tell you the number of times that I've worked on a project where people don't know, the details of it. So first I want to start with, can everybody on the team tell you why you're doing the project, what the project is, and when it is due if there's a due date. I know some projects they don't set due dates, it's more agile, so whatever the case is. But those three things are critical, and every team member should be able to tell you that. And what I have found is that yeah, a team member can usually tell me some of those basics, but it's usually very incomplete. And what I mean by that is they will tell me kind of what they think the project is based on what their task assignments are. And they won't have any awareness or very limited awareness of the other features or the other epics of that project. And that causes two problems. The first problem is obviously a collaboration problem. So, again, a number of situations that I've been in where, two team members will be working on something in their silos and they won't think that there's any kind of interdependencies. And so they'll, just kind of go on their way. And then we'll get to a point where, one tries to connect to the other and it doesn't work. And that could have been easily avoided with communication and a better understanding of what the project looked like and what was involved. So that's really the first problem that it causes, is just that lack of collaboration. And then the second problem is it reduces buy-in. So when everybody's working in a silo and they're just knocking their, as they call it, knocking their tickets out, knocking their tasks out, you know, there's not there's not a sense of accountability and responsibility that comes from just doing your tasks. I mean, yes, you're accountable for your tasks, but what I think is most effective and what I've seen is most effective is when everybody takes a shared responsibility for the project. And that creates the buy in. That makes everything easier when everybody wants to see the project be successful and is invested in it. And that takes pressure off of everybody else, takes pressure off project managers, functional managers where applicable, product managers, product owners, etc. Just makes everything easier because the team is kind of driving themselves. And that's really what we want. So that's the first one. The second one is the requirements, and I'm not going to get into the very basics of bad requirements and that kind of thing. I think we've all heard about that a lot. But what I want to talk about here is pieces of requirements that are missing. And so really for me, there's two. There's business cases and there's edge cases, what I call edge cases. So a lot of times, the team will get a requirement, the requirements will say, okay, we want this, and it'll probably look good, at first. But then as that team member executes those requirements, they start realizing, oh, well, we missed this edge case. We missed that edge case, and it could break the system. It could break the flow. So then really they have two things. They can either, run that back through, whatever the process is in that project, whether that's going back through the product owner, whether that's, project manager, whatever that is, but that takes time. And then the second option is for them to just make an assumption. And I've seen this happen a number of times. They make an assumption, they move forward with that assumption. Then we come back to a demo and it's not the way the product owner wants it. And then we have to do rework. So that's, requirements. It sounds easy, but it's really making sure that those edge cases are clear and, thought through. The other part of this is business cases, right? And, you know, a lot of developers, they're not going to have an understanding, if it's a developer or whoever it is, a lot of team members are not going to have an understanding of all the business processes. And even a product owner who's getting the requirements from the business, they may not either. So, when you're dealing with processes that are complex, whether that's, finance, legal, whatever that is, those folks, they should be involved in the project. They should be at the demos. They should be seeing the systems that impact their work, and they should be able to say, hey, this isn't going to work with our current flow. You need to make this adjustment or that adjustment. Otherwise, you get to a point where, you start doing, internal QA and they say, oh, this isn't going to work. Then you got to go back and you're losing a lot of time. So really have to have the right people involved. So those three things to me are really where, I see a lot of, lack of clarity in projects, and where people just can't see those goalposts because those things are preventing them from seeing them. The next one I want to talk about is what I call agile theater, and this is a case that comes up where, the team is following processes just because that's the way they're written. So whether that's the way they were written in the Scrum guide, whether that's something that they read or heard, and of course there's a case where a PMO is just, kind of prescribing processes, and that's a different case. But the processes that are being run should be looked at through a singular lens, which is this delivering value to the team? If it is not delivering value to the team, then it should be reevaluated. If you are having various ceremonies, let's say you have a retrospective, and in that retrospective, three issues come up, and the Scrum Master or the project manager has to run those up the flagpole to get them addressed by somebody in leadership, and those are not addressed by the time the next retrospective is scheduled for 2 weeks later after the next sprint. It's okay to skip that. That's not going to bring value to the team for them to, bring a whole team together, and, spend the time doing it, and just to not have any results for them. And that's, to me, it's also a little bit, it doesn't do a lot for morale when you come back and the same issues are still there. So, you can say, hey, we're still working on these things from last week. We're going to cancel for this week, but, have that flexibility and make sure, that everything is being done with that singular mindset of, is this providing value to the team, or are we doing it just to do it? And if we are, then let's look at reevaluating it. Kind of hand in hand with that is making sure that there is efficiency in the process. And the example that comes to mind is, friend of mine. He was working on a team, and they had weekly sprint planning meetings with all 12 team members for 2 hours a week. And to me, that's not efficient. And kind of the way that team was structured, a lot of the things that are being talked about were not relevant to all the team members. And so it might be 10% relevant, 20% relevant. That's not a good use of time. So, better use of time would be, okay, let me work with these team members ahead of our sprint planning, start getting a backlog, making sure that we're on the right track, making sure we understand what next steps are, what this might look like for them, and then bring everybody together so that you have that shared understanding, kind of like I was talking about in the clarity point, that shared understanding of, hey, this is what the whole team is working on, so everybody can hear it. But you're not spending 2 hours, you're spending 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes for a larger group. But, really try to be efficient. And, I've heard the argument of, well, we're paying the team anyway, but there's opportunity cost in having inefficient meetings. Not just opportunity cost, but there's also a morale factor in having things that the team doesn't feel are a good use of their time. So that's some of the things that I call agile theater. And then the last part is the accountability gap. So for this one, the first one that I have seen is, in a matrix organization, I see it where we'll have resources that are shared between the business side / you want to call that lights on, you want to call that operations. I'll refer to it as operations. And they're also, working on a project. And so what happens is, I see it where operations is the priority, understandable if that's, kind of lights on thing that's important for the business. But then that creates some real challenges with the project. And so it's like, okay, well, if there's an operations emergency, then the project essentially has to stop for whatever that period is. If there's not proper backups for that person. And I've seen it a lot where there's not, especially in a matrixed organization. There tends not to be. So it's making sure that we are kind of avoiding that situation, and the way to avoid that situation is by being clear about priority and expectations. And it's making sure that if you're saying, hey, we're going to do this project and we're going to do it with shared resources, um, then we have to be willing to you know either bring in help for that person who is doing operations work, or making sure that we have a backup plan. But we shouldn't set a project into motion if it's not a priority, and if we don't have resources allocated in a way that's reasonable, or not willing to adjust that allocation to make the project successful. I think that's absolutely critical. And this point also, going away from matrix, looking at like non-matrix, this is just the most, really the most basic thing, is making sure that the team understands what the priority is and what the expectations are, of that project. I think that one's a little bit more self-explanatory, a little bit clearer, but in some cases it's not. In some cases there's a lot of priorities, and it's difficult for the team, whether that's team members, whether that's project managers, whatever that is. It's difficult for them to say, okay, well, where does this slot? I was told this is a top priority and that's a top priority. So that clarity is really critical. And then the last one is, the people that are responsible for delivering the project are not empowered to drive it. And what I mean by that is that, um, you know, project managers, for example, ultimately, I think, we think of this concept of responsibility without authority, and that's a tough concept. It's a very common situation for project managers to find themselves in projects, and but what's difficult about it is, where I see projects really fall down is a project manager, an experienced project manager, will say, "Hey, there's this risk, and I can see this risk coming. I'm highlighting it now, but it may not hit for a couple weeks, but I really think we're at risk here." And that may be accepted, or that may be mitigated in a way that the person responsible thinks is sufficient, but it isn't. And so ultimately, that project manager or that person who's responsible, they don't have the power to really fix it in the way that it needs to be fixed. And they can try and steer, but ultimately they're just kind of in this really tight spot. And so I think it's really important that we empower these people to have the, either one, to give them the power to be able to make the changes that they need to, or two, if is a situation where they have to run it up the ladder, that those people are really responsive and really engaged to help mitigate those risks and be responsive to issues as they come up. It's not just something where we, as leadership, we can just kind of throw a project out there and just kind of say, okay, do this project. Need to be available to help empower people to lead projects. So those are some of the things that I have seen. It's not comprehensive by any means, but those are some of the things that came to mind when I was exploring the topic. So I thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you got value out of the video. Thanks a lot.